So what we're making today is a coffee colorito mole, and it's an authentic dish from the Oaxacan region of Mexico, and we're incorporating coffee into it because it lends itself well to the flavor of the chilies, which are a major component to this dish. So there's a few things we're going to do today. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brown our chicken, and we're going to use this pot throughout the whole cooking process of our mole. Okay, so I'm going to brown this as we do a few other things here. If you can see over here, I'm using a flat iron, cast iron plate over the flame, which most people might have at home, and in place of a comal, which is a traditional dish used in Mexican cookery to toast items, and it's dry cookery. We're doing what is called asado to these vegetables. So I have onions, sweet white onion is what I'm using, garlic that's in the peel still. We'll take that out after. We also have some almonds that are looking about done. We'll take those off in a second. And I have Roma tomatoes with the skin on. And I've been toasting these all for about 15 to 20 minutes to get into this stage. At this stage, I'm going to make an onion garlic puree with some of these spices. We're going to toast the spices and make a puree. And then I'm going to move into talking about how to work with chilies. And then we're going to also work with those on the comal. Okay, coming back to our charred onions and garlic. You see that I've toasted it without any oil. I want this char. This char is going to lend that deep smoky flavor to our mole. This is just one of the steps. We'll take care of this in the blender. And don't worry about any of the char. We're not trying to burn it. We're just trying to give it a very toasty flavor. Using a little bit of hot water here, just enough so that it will puree. And I've taken these spices up here, the peppercorns, the cloves, and the allspice, and toasted them over the comal and put them through a spice grinder. This will also go in with our puree. So this is what our onion, garlic, and toasted spice puree should look like. And this is one component. We're building up different components to make this authentic layered flavor sauce. So we're going to work with the dried chilies at this point. These are the ancho chilies, characteristic of the nice skin that's kind of crumpled. It has a smoky, almost coffee flavor to it. And then these are guajillo chilies, which are going to give body to the mole. Whenever working with chilies and you're toasting them, first thing we're going to do is open them up, take the stem and the seed out. Some recipes will save the seeds and incorporate them into the mole so that we're just using the flesh. In this case, we don't want it to be as spicy. A classic black mole will actually use the seeds and toast them. But we're going to take the seeds and the stems out, and then coming right on over here to the comal, we're going to start to toast them. Same thing with the guajillo peppers. I want to take the stem off. I want to open them up so that they're flat and that I could actually toast them. I'm using about a medium heat on this gas range here for the comal. I don't want it so hot that it's going to scorch it or too low that it takes too long. Okay, so as these chilies are toasting, we'll see them start to blister and slightly smoke. So this first one that went on is starting to actually look like it should. See a little bit of blistering right there. That is my sign to turn it over. I don't want them to be black, just blistered. Okay, blisters are happening here. It's moving around. That's a sign to add it to my hot water. Reconstituting our dried toasted chilies. This is the base of the body and the flavor of this mole. And if you can imagine the taste of a dried chili, the smokiness of it, you can actually think of how coffee goes well with that. What I like to do with my chilies, put them in hot water and let them soak for about 30 minutes so they're completely reconstituted. And then this is what's 30 minutes later. I have my chilies that I've taken out and my water that I've used to soak in it. So at this point, the chili looks kind of a lot different than it did in the beginning. It's reconstituted, but we have our toasted areas. This is what we're going to do is we're going to puree it. A blender comes in very handy for making a mole. Puree it with just enough of the soaking liquid to get it to move in the blender. So back to the chicken. I was browning on medium-low heat for a good 10 or 15 minutes to crisp up the skin, and as you can see in the pan, we have a little bit of fond from the chicken. This is the pan that we're going to use to cook the chili puree in once we get to that point. Back to the chili puree. I've added just enough liquid to use the blender. So here's our chili puree, and as you can see, I added minimal amounts of water so that I didn't dilute that. I'm now going to strain with the back of a ladle. This is a preferred method. You can use a rubber spatula, but you want a fine sieve. You don't want to use a chinois. This is what we're looking for, and you see the seeds and the skin that we were able to strain. Don't forget to scrape off the bottom. And now we're looking at a very clean chili puree. So moving on to the next component of this mole, we have the tomatoes that we've charred on the comal, and we can see that they've kind of opened up. We're going to use everything that's in here and put them in the blender. Another smoky characteristic is the charred skins. Okay, so one more component to our mole set up. Our coffee is still waiting since it comes later in the game. Now I'm going to work with 3 ingredients and a little bit of oil in this pan. This is the chicken pan that I'm going to use. We have the plantain, and I'm looking for a plantain that's slightly ripe. I don't want it too green. We're actually going to fry the plantain, the bread, and then the raisins in our oil. If you can't find a plantain, a banana will be a good substitute. Just enough oil to coat. Okay, so after we get some nice color on our plantains and our bread, we're going to remove that from the pan and we're going to toast our raisins. And we're actually going to plump them in the hot oil, and we want to make sure it's about medium heat so that we don't overcook them. We don't want to char them because otherwise we won't be able to use them in the mole. So this will just take a second here to get some color on our ingredients. So the mole we're doing here is a variation on a classic Oaxacan mole. There's 7 different moles that are considered classic. This is on the darker side since we're toasting the chilies. And I felt this would go well with the coffee because of the toasty characteristics, earthy characteristics that you're finding in the ingredients. Raisins and coffee go well together. Spices like the peppercorns go well, the chilies go well. And in the end, we're going to add our Mexican chocolate. Chocolate and coffee go well. So that's where this recipe lends itself well. When you're choosing your bread, I chose a whole grain bread that I had around. You could choose any kind of leftover bread, be it French bread, challah, whole grain. So that's what we're looking for color. So here yet another component to our mole. And we're going to plump the raisins. I can see that it's still hot enough by the shimmer in my oil. And this happens pretty quickly. They turn a lighter color and plump up to the original size they were as a grape. Raisins have so much sugar in them, they burn really easily. The char that I put on the onions was only on the surface area. The char that was on the chilies was only on the surface area, but these, there's so much sugar, they go really quickly. And then that sugar is then bitter. Okay, so we're at the point where we have all the different components that we've worked on. We have our onion puree with the toasted spices. We have our toasted tomato puree. We have the puree of guajillo and ancho peppers. And we have our toasted ingredients of plantains, bread, and raisins. Now we're ready to start making the sauce. The first step is to cook this chili puree. We're going to start with a little bit of lard. I'm going to add the chili puree to this. It's going to cook pretty quickly here. So what we're doing is we're cooking out all the moisture we had in there when we pureed it in the blender. Okay, so we're at this point. It's been about 3 or 4 minutes of cooking it down. You can see that we've cooked out a lot of the moisture. This is helping cook the chilies so they're a little bit more of a delicate flavor. They don't have the raw chili flavor anymore since they were never cooked. They were just dried out. So I'm using this recipe, but I've divided it by 4 so that I'm doing it just for 2 portions today and for the chilies that we worked with. The rest of the items that we've worked with was the full recipe, so you can see what it looks like. But here is the next step. I'm going to add our onion garlic mixture. And this is a traditional mole where it's layered. The different layers are cooked down until we've evaporated the water and incorporate all the flavors. Okay, coming back to our mole, it's been about 4 or 5 minutes of cooking it down. Once again, we have a thick paste, but now we have some body to it from the onions and the garlic. And the aromatics are great. We have the cloves, the peppercorns, the cinnamon, and the allspice. So we're coming in with the next step, which will be the roasted tomatoes. And this is the next layer. We're going to have some patience, and then about 5 minutes we'll have the moisture cooked out of it and another thick paste. Okay, now we're at the step where we've cooked down the chili puree, the onion puree, and the tomato puree, and it's starting to look a little bit like lava. That's the term I'll use. And this is a complex dish, but it's something that can be made ahead of time and then used. You can freeze it and then use it for special occasions. To actually do this is a real treat. At the very end, when you taste it, you're like, wow, that was a lot of work, but it was well worth it. So we're serving it with chicken today, but you can serve it with pork. It does go well with braised beef. So chicken, beef, and pork are the 3 things I like to serve it with. So the next step we're going to do here is put this on low heat, let it continue to simmer, and then finish blending our ingredients, the final reduction we'll call it. Raisins, bread, and plantains. And you see in each blend we've added a little bit of liquid, and then we're going and reducing that liquid out to concentrate the flavors. Okay, so now we're going to blend our fried almonds, bread, plantains, and those plumped raisins, and do a quick puree here with a little bit of chicken stock. And then we'll add that to our mole and cook that down for another 5 minutes until it has the visual of bubbling lava. Okay, now we're near the end of our mole making process, and now we're going to add a little bit of chicken stock and our fresh brewed coffee, and then at the very end we'll finish it with chocolate and a little bit of limes. So what I'm brewing right here is Starbucks espresso roast, and I'm going to have about a cup of this that I'm going to add to the mole, and this is a top layer of this whole sauce making process, and then we'll cook it down again to have this consistency of a very thick sauce. So we add our coffee, and I'm going to do about 2 cups of chicken stock. And now we turn it down to very low heat. I'm going to simmer this for about a half an hour to 45 minutes until we get back to that stage of a very thick paste. So we're back to the mole. We've cooked it down for a bit. It's getting some nice texture. The flavors are coming together. I'm going to add the chicken that I started with, the browned chicken leg and thigh. And I'm using this because this cut is best for the braising technique. So this is Mexican chocolate. It comes in a 3-ounce block, very different than the chocolate you're used to. If you can see the texture of it, the sugar is not really emulsified with the chocolate. So this will work with chocolate milk or finishing sauces with, but eating on its own is nothing compared to traditional chocolate. So I'm going to add that straight to the sauce. And I'm going to balance some of this flavor with some fresh lime juice. And to pull up the flavors of the chilies, about a teaspoon of salt. And then this whole mixture, give it another 15 or 20 minutes of cooking. We cooked our chicken probably 50% of the way. And here we are simmering, braising in our mole. And in about a half an hour, we'll be ready for dinner. Okay, looks like our mole is pretty to the point of being done. We have that bubbling again. It's reduced a little bit. Now's the time to serve it. Mole, you can serve it with a variety of things. I'm going to serve it simply with the sauce and a little bit of lime on the side for garnish. You can serve it with rice. That's the most traditional way to serve it. You can see this is just falling off the bone. That's exactly what we want. A little lime wedge. You could do some roasted chili. So here we have the coffee Coloradita mole. There's a little bit of work involved, but it's well worth it.